just to get a sense of who's here, who here is currently searching for a business? Any searchers here? Awesome. Gabrielle, how long have you been searching for? How's the process going?
I've been actively searching for about 45 days.
45 days.
Yeah.
Right on.
Starting to pick up some steam.
Yeah. How's it been? How are you feeling about it so far?
Feel good.
Good. Good. Awesome. Any business owners here? You're a business owner too, but what business do you own?
Commercial ice cream equipment.
Commercial ice cream equipment.
Yeah.
So doing the maintenance for it, the manufacturing for it?
So we buy, refurbish, and resell commercial equipment. But just in the ice cream frozen beverage space.
Yeah. Huh.
Good.
How long have you been doing that for?
We bought it almost 2 years ago.
How are things going?
Really well. Yeah,
Yeah.
roughly 20% year-on-year growth.
Great.
Have a bolt-on acquisition opportunity on our desk right now. So good stuff.
Yeah, beautiful. I'm always amazed by, even all the years that I've been in the space, I mean, I find out about new industries and new things I didn't even know existed, right? So, cool stuff. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for that. All right, so what we're going to talk about today, the whole purpose of this is we're going to talk about some academic research that I've done. And there's two outcomes that will come from it. One, hopefully what I'll tell you today will help you in your endeavor to close deals, whether you're looking for your first business, Gabrielle, or you're looking to do a bolt-on, by understanding what things make sellers satisfied when they're selling. And for those of you that are business owners, or those of you that become business owners, you can use this research to think about how to attain happiness after you end up selling. Sound like a plan?
Yeah, I'll do it.
You'll find I'm a pretty interactive person, so if you have questions, comments, you disagree with something I say, you want to talk more, just raise your hand, interject. We'll make it good, fun, and conversational. So the seller journey. Think about this as the happiness level of a business owner or operator. You're at this baseline level. When you go through the sale process, happiness level goes down. They've done some cool research on this back in 2016. Then, eventually, when you sell the business, there is a short-term blip of happiness and elation and ecstasy when the deal closes from the seller perspective. But then it gets worse during the transition. After the transition's over, life after, happiness levels get higher, but notice that the life after, on average, is lower than it is during operating. So being a business owner, it's a good, stimulating, happy life. I mean, it's certainly a lot of work, but overall, business owners have higher levels of life and career satisfaction during operating than they do afterwards. Does that surprise anybody?
Yeah.
Yeah? Why?
Just to be clear, so they're happier after operating than they are when operating?
No, they are less happy after they sell.
Okay, okay.
Yeah, so notice how the life after is slightly lower.
Okay.
Slightly lower than the operating part.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, back there, you surprised?
Yeah, I'm just surprised because I know, we talk, we run a podcast on the side.
Yeah.
I talk to a lot of operators, and there's a lot of operators, specifically in the home service space, that are struggling every day. It's a grind every day. It's firefighting. So it's hard to imagine that life after that operating becomes worse. Right?
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's interesting, right? Because, and listen, I've been there, right? I've operated very dirty businesses and been very stressed out and, totally hated life and all that good stuff. And I resonate with that. I've also sold those businesses, and I've been in a place afterwards, personally, where I have just not had that same level of life engagement. Frankly, it's just boring, right? One of the panelists earlier was talking about how he was in the 34-year-old, sold to private equity, single dad group. He had nothing to do, and now he's back in the game. So it's like having a child leave, right? Empty nest syndrome can lead to less engagement. And I think that a lot of business owners out there believe before they sell that selling is going to be an easy process, but they studied it, right? And it's not. A lot of challenges there. You were saying, Bruce?
Yeah, I mean, I think it matters, what's the seller's personal situation.
Mhm.
What the deal right now, got it approved in March of 24. That's when we got the loan approved. Seller's a single guy up in New York, 53 years old, never married, no kids. This is his baby. I'm going to sell, I'm not going to sell. I'm going to sell, I'm not going to sell. So
Yeah.
I think if you're searching or you're looking for another business, I think getting into a deep dive into the weeds about the seller and his lifestyle, why he's selling, or why he may not, is super cool.
Yeah, absolutely critical part of it. And it's all about the individual and the journey that they're going through. So good stuff. And keep the interactions going. So what I did is knowing that selling a business can be a challenge, and I've personally been there, I decided to embark after I sold my last business to get a PhD studying entrepreneurship through acquisition. And I really want to help understand what led to business sellers to be satisfied after they sell their business. Because oftentimes in ETA, it's very transactional, right? You got your deal team, you got the deal closed. But I was really curious about what happens to sellers. How do they feel about their businesses after they actually sell? Make sense? So what we started with is we looked at successful businesses. We're talking doing at least $500,000 of EBITDA, oftentimes more, and we all know what businesses like this sell out. So we're really talking about the 1% here. And we did interviews with 32 of these owners, right? Very in-depth interviews, followed by a survey of 630 transactions. So we have a lot of data to go through here. And what I want to walk through is some of the key findings and takeaways that I had from doing this research about what separates individuals that are satisfied after their sale and versus unsatisfied after their sale, with the caveat that all of these individuals were financially successful. Everyone following so far?
How did you get to 600 transactions with only 30 people?
We did 32 interviews,
Yeah.
and then we got a data set,
Okay.
right? Did a further survey for an additional 630.
Okay.
So you kind of like learn some themes from the first 32 and talking to people. You go through, you like code everything and read it. Then you follow up with a second survey where you get more data points to make the study more relevant.
Nice.
Excellent question, Mike, and I appreciate that from a fellow educator out there. So good stuff. All right, so insight number one. One thing that is common among unsatisfied sellers, right? So 64 versus 33 is this phenomenon of what we'll call being blinded by the price, right? So let's say, Gabrielle, that your business is doing like $1 million of EBITDA, and you credibly think that it's worth, $5 or $6 million. But then Sean comes by and he offers you $10 million for the business, right? You're like, whoa, my little $1 million EBITDA business here is no way it's like worth that much money, but I'm going to take the money and I'm going to retire. I'm going to go and just spend more time with my family, travel the world, whatever it is that you want to do. Take the money, do the deal. But with hindsight, sellers that went down that route, and you can see a quote up there from one of them, I was surprised how quickly we destroyed the culture with the sale, tended to be in the highly unsatisfied camp. What I like in this too, from my own personal experience, is anyone here single in the dating world currently? Or we have a lot of married people here. All right, good. Sean, you and I, Gabriella, good. I think there's like some matchmaking to happen there. Maybe later, we'll find out. Well, what I like in this too is I was coding these interviews and looking at it is it's similar to you see someone of the opposite sex who is insanely attractive, right? They're good looking, they got charming, they have worth a lot of money. But that masks the fact that maybe deep down, they're kind of a jerk, right? They're not a good person. And if you got into a relationship with them, it may not play out well. So one theme is blinded by the price. What do you think about that? How does that resonate? Surprising? Make sense?
Some of them blinded by the price would more so be like when they think they can sell their business for a higher amount, but it's not really worth that much, right? Like,
Yeah.
I feel like brokers tend to pop people up on what they think their business is worth, and the reality of what businesses are really trading at in that space are likely two different realities. Like I had to have that conversation with my sellers, and I literally flew out there to meet them in person to tell them, honestly, here's what your business I think is really worth. Versus telling you over the phone and feeling like an asshole. I had to tell them that in person, and it was a tough pill for them to swallow.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
And that's absolutely right. Business sellers have oftentimes unreasonable expectations, right? But what's interesting is that what you can incredibly tell a seller, and I talk to sellers about this a lot, is that if you take an offer that is significantly above market, you are likely going to regret that going forward. And it's not just my opinion about it. There's like good solid data to back it up because the effect is crazy. It's like, oh, wow, that much money, I can do whatever I want to. But the seller forgets what those intangible things are.
And Reid, just to make sure that we're understanding correctly, is it 33% are blinded by the price, or 64% blinded by the price?
64% of unhappy sellers
Okay.
exhibit this attribute.
Okay.
Yeah, great question. Yes, Mr. Marks.
Reid, I think, and another one I'm very interested, I see a lot where blinded by the prices, they'll come in, let's use your example, $1 million in email.
Yeah.
We're gonna get $5 million. The buyer comes in and says, well, I want you to hold a 10% note. And then he says, yeah, but you gotta leave $500,000 to $600,000 working capital, and then you gotta pay your broker, then you gotta pay your attorney, then you gotta pay the capital gains tax. And they have an epiphany 2 weeks later, and go, holy crap, I thought I was getting $5 million for this business, I'm not gonna wait 2.5.
Yeah.
Have you seen that, like in your interviews where sellers talk about what they, when they look at the settlement statement, what they get and how that plays into blinded by the price?
Yeah, absolutely. Because for the purpose of this research, the amount we think about what the exact monetary value is to them, and certainly sellers have issues of, oh, I'm going to get like a high, money, an awesome offer with it. But then when they actually, look back, hey, after taxes, after attorney's fees, after broker's fees, here's what the actual net amount is there. So that's something that's not necessarily a critical part of this research, but there is, what I'd say for this is that there's not a differentiating factor of satisfied versus unsatisfied business owners on that. We'll talk in a second about the role that brokers and intermediaries play, but I think that's a good consideration for sellers, but not a direct part of this research, if that makes sense. Did that answer your question in any capacity?
Thank you.
All right, awesome. Anything else? Cool, yeah.
Was there an alternative? Like, is the alternative selling at a lower price or not selling at all?
That's a great question. For the purpose of this, it's that deals that actually went through and happened, right? We can talk about what some of the factors of deals that go through versus don't go through are, but this is the idea that if you want to have lower levels of satisfaction, right? One way to get there is to take a high price without thinking about what the other tangible things are. And the crazy part about it, though, is that the sellers that go through this are actually conscious of the fact that, hey, if I sell to like a buyer that doesn't share these same values as me, that I may not have a good transition afterwards. But with a high enough number, they just do it anyways. And then it's almost like in the moment they know they're making a bad choice, but they still do it, and then they're unhappy a number of years later, right? So this blinding effect, it sounds simple, but it's actually insanely strong. And it's not just for unsophisticated sellers, right? It happens to successful individuals that are out there operating businesses. So good questions. All right, anything else? Beautiful. So that's one insight, is avoid being blinded by the price. Second one is, could come as no surprise, individuals that both do deals and that have higher levels of satisfaction, they use competent help as part of the deal. But there's two nuances to this that come out. One is that, anyone here an intermediary or broker in the room? Awesome. Loan broker. All right, cool. But not any business brokers. I think a lot of us know that when it comes to selling businesses, the brokers take a long time to cultivate those relationships, right? It's oftentimes not a quick transactional thing. So the ones that are finding competent brokers out there, it takes years to cultivate that. One quote up here, which kind of illustrates the theme, is that a seller knew an intermediary for years, tried to buy a business from that intermediary, was very impressed by how they acted. And then when they end up selling their own business, they chose that one and they were highly satisfied with the outcome. So a key practitioner takeaway from this is that cultivate long-term relationships with the intermediaries, because having the right intermediary in a deal, or let me flip that, having the wrong intermediary in the deal, a number of these transactions had an intermediary that worked on the deal sometimes for years and prevented it from closing. And what would happen, yes?
So what are the characteristics of a quality intermediary?
I am not qualified to necessarily talk about that, but what I can say, and it's a great question, what I can say is that when a bad intermediary gets into a deal, sellers are very slow to get that intermediary out. So a bad intermediary deal has a very high stickiness factor to it.
Yeah.
So the guidance is that an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure, right? Be very thoughtful about what intermediary you bring into the deal,
Yeah.
if you're a seller, and try to have the discipline which sellers really don't have that well of one according to the research
Yeah.
to get them out of there as quickly as possible.
Yeah.
So announcement prevention is worth a pounding here. And who here has worked with the intermediary? Yeah, you had a question?
Just of the transactions, were a percentage of them proprietary or direct relationship, or was everything represented by an intermediary?
No. It's a good question. For this one, it was about 60% were
Okay.
brokered, 40% were proprietary overall. And there's no
Is there a correlation, like in happiness of intermediary
Yes.
deals?
Yes,
Okay.
absolutely. If people that use intermediaries, the businesses, one, sell for more money.
Yeah.
And that's like controlling for everything. They sell for more money and they are more satisfied as well.
Okay.
So on average, it's better to use an intermediary.
Yeah.
But it's better not to use a bad intermediary than using a bad one per se.
Cool.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah. And the key is that when a bad intermediary gets into a deal, it's just so interesting how long the process plays out before they get that intermediary out, get a new one, and how quickly things.
Is that simply because they have contracts that?
No. On occasion, yes, but overall, no. It's just because when they're in a deal, there's high cost getting a bad intermediary out. And we could talk a lot about what some of the psychological and theoretical reasons for that are, but there's a high stickiness factor. So at the conference here, there's a number of, I'm a fan of Jackie and Quint. I think they're speaking tomorrow. They're obviously, I tell you, good ones to use, but there are plenty of, in my opinion, mediocre ones out there. So a key takeaway is if you want to be a satisfied seller, find the right one, cultivate the relationship slowly, and if you ultimately make a mistake in who you bring on, be very quick to get them out, right? Yeah.
I just support this point. What I've seen with a couple of acquisition targets is that the sellers that don't quite know what they're doing, the ones that think transacting a business is like transacting a piece of real estate,
Mhm.
they're more susceptible to a bad intermediary,
Yeah.
right? And they kind of they don't feed them out. So I've actually seen, and I agree with your point, that they sign these long contracts for exclusivity, and they're held into these deals,
Yeah.
and they don't know what they're doing. And so I actually had a conversation with an acquisition target last week. He's like, I'm finally out of that 2-year contract.
Yeah.
The guy tried to sell his business twice. And
Yeah.
like he's kind of woken up a little bit.
Yeah. And again, the contracts are powerful, right? And they have strong anchoring effect to them. But even if they don't sign a contract, they still have this long stickiness factor. And when you remove a bad one, things move very quickly from there. So great point. Obviously, those buyers or those sellers didn't come to SMBash and learn from all the people here. Otherwise, they would not have made that mistake, right? All right, beautiful. So that's insight number 2.
Sorry, just a question.
Yeah, please.
When you say out, is that solely intermediaries, or could it be on the sell side, diligence providers, paying business rate rates and beforehand, breaking up?
Yeah.
When you say out, is that solely intermediaries, or the other players that help the business get with?
Absolutely fantastic question. For the purposes of this study, it is either a broker or a trusted advisor like an attorney acting as a broker. But the criteria for this one is, do they get some kind of monetary compensation when the deal closes, right? Like, some percent or something like that. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
This is just on the sell side, right?
Yeah. This is just, this research is exclusively focused on business sellers.
Yeah.
The next round will be focused on business buyers. So we'll see how the two match up and go from there. Awesome. All right. Hey, I appreciate the questions, and everyone's obviously leaving their tortoise shells to be interactive, which is good stuff. Someone challenged me to say that word during this, so I just made $100. I'm now a paid speaker for the day. Good stuff. All right, insight 3. Every business I've ever tried to sell, right, that I have sold, that I've been the owner of, I always pushed for 100% cash at close, and I want to get out of there as quickly as possible. I'm simple-minded. That's how I like transactions. Anyone here a big 100% cash on close person from a seller standpoint? Yeah. Why do you like cash on close?
Because if I wanted the money over time, I would just keep the business because it's passive income.
Right. Just want to get paid what it's worth right now.
Yeah.
If you wanted passive income, you would keep on owning the business and go from there. Yeah. So a theme, and again, I'm biased, right? I like cash at close deals, but for sellers that are satisfied, they actually take considerations beyond cash at close And this is not just, rolling equity, right? It could be in the form of seller financing. But those that kept a economic interest in the business in some capacity, significantly more satisfied than those that just took the quick 100% cash. I'm out of here. I'm good to go. So that was for me personally, that was a surprise finding. What are your thoughts? How does that resonate with people?
Big red flag when someone says, I want all cash and close.
Right.
If I'm a buyer, no way.
Right.
Not
Right. Yeah.
Why?
Because it's signaling, Bruce, that they're hiding something, right? Because as we all have heard,
So I'm doing a management buyout. I'm doing a management buyout.
Oh, You
yeah,
already know the business.
Yeah.
You already uncovered a lot of the
No, the person managing my company's buying me out. But yeah.
Awesome.
but Bruce, you say it right, because from a buyer perspective, we're never going to have all diligence. You can never know everything about the business, right? So 100% cash at close is a signal. It's almost a guarantee that there's something being hidden in that transaction. So it's a huge red flag for a buyer. But the crazy part is that for a seller, it's also an outcome that leads to less satisfaction in the longer term, right? It kind of makes this vision that they want to have more involvement. Yeah.
I'm surprised by this, and maybe I'm off on this, but I would presume the buyer's going to change things about the business when they have an intent to make changes, and that could be something, if I've got to observe it regularly, bothers me as the seller, right? You're messing with my baby.
Yeah.
You're now, this is my ex-wife going on dates with this other guy.
Yeah.
You have a good feeling.
Yeah.
And if you cash out, you don't observe that as closely as if you're continuing. So it seems opposite of what I would expect.
Yeah. And what's your name?
Bobby.
Bobby. And Bobby, like me personally, again, I'm the same way. I want all cash and I want out, because I think that's the best thing for me psychologically. I think it's the best thing for the buyer. I think it's the best thing for the business, quite frankly. And that's the interesting part about doing these, in-depth research projects, is it forces me to take away my bias and think about things in a different way.
It's very surprising.
Yeah, very, very surprising to me as well. All right, cool. Yeah.
Well,
Yeah, him first.
But
We're coming to you again, Bruce. Yeah.
I mean, I'd really love to understand like the difference in seller happiness, post-close considerations, either being rolled equity or seller note, right?
Yeah.
Because your involvement in the business, and I can see if you're rolling equity and you're still have your day job, you're still operating the company.
Yeah.
That's obviously could be a lot more fulfilling than just having a seller note that you're no longer in the business, but you're just getting paid a certain amount of time, right?
And it's a great point, and that's something that we want to delve into for future research project, is the actual kind. And we'll talk about involvement in a second, but how that looks. Is it a seller note? Is it rolled equity? Right? What's the actual role? And to kind of go deeper and nuance into that, because it's I think the have those distinctions from from a practitioner standpoint is absolutely critical. All right, we have a couple others. Yeah.
no, he asked, you read my mind.
You got it, huh? Look at that. You're communicating already. I like it. Yeah, go ahead.
Just when you say long term, what time frame is long term that they are at? So I understand the emotional attachment that has with the business, but when a buyer comes in, they're going to make changes that over time will make the seller unhappy, right? As you mentioned. So when you say long term, they will be happier. What is that long term? 1 year, 3 years, 5 years?
Yeah, great question. It's a minimum of 1 year after the sale, but the actual median for this study was 7 years after the sale. So we're talking like well, as John Maynard Keynes says, in the long run, we're all dead, right? But we're talking a couple of years here. Yeah.
So your statement there that your 90% will be worth less than your 10%,
Yeah.
that gets to a real underlying point that it's about economics,
Yeah.
right? And I remember I was in college, I had an investment banker.
Where'd you go to school?
Morehouse College in Atlanta.
Ah, cool.
So I had an investment banker who taught an introduction to leveraged buyouts class to us while we were in college.
Yeah.
And he taught us this concept of what schmuck insurance is.
Yeah.
So if you're selling a business, you want to hold back some equity, because if the guy who buys it 10x's the business, you're going to feel like a schmuck.
Absolutely.
You didn't use some equity in the deal.
Yeah,
Right, so the
absolutely.
question comes here, like, is this narrative more that they're happy that they left something on the table so that they don't feel like a schmuck? Is that the narrative?
That is certainly one narrative of it, is they want to have economic upside in it going forward. I would actually argue though, and again, I'm like the schmuck that like actually read all these transcripts and coded them all, right? I will actually tell you, I believe it's much more emotional, right? Because we're talking about people that were, most of them were in like the, we'll say top 1 to 3% before they sold the business. They're now in like the 1% plus afterwards. So money is not like a huge consideration for this exact population. So for them, the emotion to me is what actually drives it more than the money.
So they want to see their baby grow up a little.
Yeah, and they want to be a part of that, but they just more want to like, they want to see it. They want to feel like they have some kind of stake in it, right? So even though the stake comes through money, it's not the monetary value; it's the emotion that comes with that. Because that individual in particular, that's a traditional search fund deal, by the way, in case anybody's curious. He was, when he was saying this, he was talking like his face was like glowing. He was like so happy, talking about how his 10% became worth more than the 90% when he closed it, right? So there's just a lot of emotional joy around these things.
Financially, meant in how he felt.
Well, it was financial, right? But it was you could clearly sense like the amount of happiness with it. And that's just one example. There's a lot of others where that same narrative goes through. Yeah.
Yeah, so can you just explain what the numbers represent? 25%, 24%?
Yeah, that means that the numbers up there show the difference between satisfied and unsatisfied for the quantitative, right? So those 630, 55% versus 24% for satisfied versus unsatisfied.
Satisfied on the left, unsatisfied on the right.
Generally, yeah. Sometimes I mix it up, but
Okay.
yeah.
And the balance,
In the middle?
like to get to 100%?
The other 20% or 10.
That accounts for certain outcomes are not necessarily measured across the data set, right? So we're just taking that 55% of them are this, 24% of them are that. Cool. All right, beautiful. So insight 3. I didn't guess we're going to go with insight 4. What do we think? We've talked about cash. We've talked about blinded by the price. Where are we going with number 4? The role. Good job, Sean. You get a round of applause for that one. We always try to have a little bit of fun here. Yeah, it's their role. Post-sale involvement, right? We talked about, do they have an economic interest? And again, I am a pretty simple-minded person. When I sell a business, I want to get out as quickly as possible. I think it's the right thing for the business. I think that it's just the right thing for me, right thing for everybody. Anyone else in that camp of wanting to get out quickly, not have a role going forward? Yeah, right?
Is this highly age correlated? Because you're a young guy, and I would think the majority of the sellers are retirement age, and it being involved just maybe a small amount of time gives them something to do in their retirement. So is there an area there?
In the case of the sample, it is because of the demographics, mostly older sellers, but not like by a significant margin. It's about 2/3 to 1/3 below the age of 50, right? Believe it or not.
Okay.
So, but the key to it is that what the really effective sellers do is that they actually are very intentional about what their role is going to be in the business afterwards. They think about it, oftentimes with the help of a good intermediary for years. And it goes the gambit. It could be that I want to sell to an ESOP, and then I want to be the CEO, not in a controlling position, but be the CEO of the ESOP company for 3 years. Then I want to transition to chairman for like 2 years, and then I just want to go back and get lunch with the team like once a month into perpetuity. So the really successful, happy sellers, satisfied sellers, insanely intentional about how they think about this stuff. It goes to the point of good proactive planning, which I don't think is much of a surprise to people here. But yeah, if you want to have a satisfied sale by a factor of 3 to 1, then essentially figure out what role you want to play in the business and run towards it. Yeah.
Is there a minority buyouts in any of the data sets, or is it all majority buyouts?
Great question. It is all majority buyouts. So the individual that is selling the business, they could have a partner, but they have the majority equity and they have control. So that's what it was limited to. Yeah.
I don't think you do, because it's all a post-sale data set. Do you have any idea, like from to like what their pre-sale perception were to their post-sale perception was? I might not want to be involved, but actually, in hindsight, actually, I wish it was.
Yeah. I have that in retrospect that I would ask somebody, like, how did you think about it, at one point versus how do you think about it now, right? Or how do you think about it 3 years before you sold and like 1 year before and then afterwards?
Yeah.
But there's no, so you can kind of see how the opinions change. And there's a lot of what we'll call, Sean, like, hypocrisy among the people getting interviewed, because they say one thing, then they talk about it afterwards. They describe how they felt about that differently. So it's very interesting to go into the nitty-gritty trenches on that. Yeah, make sense?
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah.
Do you have any like stats on the success of businesses post sale with like owners that stayed on versus owners that checked out?
Yeah, I mean, the crazy part is how you define success for the business, right?
Not going way down.
Yeah. In this case, for all of these, the businesses were all going, no business closed afterwards, right? So they all stayed open, but we don't have the data basically. We didn't study to say, hey, did the business, it was growing 10% before, did it grow afterwards? But the consideration is that the business had to be around in order to be in the sample. So it didn't, ever go bankrupt or go away or anything like that.
I only ask because, like, in our cases, we kept both of the owners involved, and the businesses stayed pretty stable to slow growth. But I wonder if the owner was gone, maybe it would dip, but then the changes that you bring in would take it to the next level versus you kind of let it run steadily. But I'm curious if anybody's had experiences with like that.
Yeah. Anyone want to share anything in here? Or we can talk a little bit up here. And it's fascinating because there's no counterfactuals in the world, right? Like, you don't know what would have happened if they had less of a role and everything like that. So I think it's a really interesting question to go through. And for future studies that we do, we're going to start to look more at the buyer satisfaction side and get some of the data to help support that stuff. So cool, great question.
Two
Yeah.
really quick ones.
Yeah.
Did that impact price? Meaning, was the seller or the business willing to take less for the business if they had the opportunity to stay on, so that they can get, whether their intention was to get a salary over X number of years, or were they thinking, hey, I'll take something for the business because I'll take less for the business because I still have a role. And then the second follow-up question to that is there any insight on how the role may have changed if they stayed in the business? Meaning, they move out of some of the business operations, but may stay on for client-facing stuff. Like, is there any insight that you gain from this?
So onto the first question on if role significantly impacts purchase price. So we'll talk about some valuation stuff soon. Short answer is actually it doesn't, right? There's things that matter a lot more. There's no statistical evidence that actually is a driver of it. And the second question was around if their involvement or if their role changed.
Yeah, I mean, like, would they want to stay on, but are they okay staying on, maybe not as like a full-on CEO, but staying on in more of like a product role or client-facing role, not necessarily running the day-to-day ops? Yeah, totally.
And in the vast majority of situations here, I'm going to estimate 95+% of them, it's a non-full-time role. It's just very intentional about what they want their role to be, right? So there's like a great example of this. The owner literally just wanted to go back, and this was, to someone's point, a 70-year-old older owner. He wanted to go back every single Tuesday for lunch with his team, but he wanted the right to do it into perpetuity. And what happened in this exact case, though, is that, and this was, I think, 4 years out. He sold the business 4 years ago at the time of the study. He actually had gone every Tuesday for lunch for like 4 straight years. And this is an equipment manufacturer and distributor, not too far from where Sean lives, where Sean's from, outside Boulder, Colorado. And that's what he wanted to do. And he stuck with it, and that's how it played out. So the key is not necessarily what the actual role is. It's just that, one, they're staying involved in some capacity. And then the bonus points to it is they thought about what they wanted to do, and they executed on that vision. Cool. Make sense?
Yeah.
All right. Awesome. Other questions on this? Beautiful. Well, Bruce, you've been quiet back there for a while. You're not dozing off, are you? Go to a little bit of quantitative here for a second. These 37% of variance of purchase price of 630 transactions is based on how much seller financing is being put on the business. Let that sink in for a second. 37% of price variance is determined by the amount of seller financing, whereas 13.2% of it is based on EBITDA margin.
Oh.
Does that seem counterintuitive to anybody?
Yes. No.
No? All right, who thinks no? Who's saying no? Why?
Because, like, if you can have
seller is willing to take on more financing, especially if they're willing to accept certain conditions to that financing.
Mhm.
So like, therefore, you can put a much larger range of purchase prices because, yeah, they want to pay a lot more than somebody else because they're actually open more creative selling financing structure.
Yeah, absolutely. It's the idea that if you're going to put your money where your mouth is, right, and you want to get an increase in price, and doing seller financing is a great way to do it. Yeah, but let me push. And it's also Bruce was talking about signaling earlier, right? Red flags. If they're going to take a bunch of seller financing, it's going to give a buyer potentially more faith in the business, right? Yeah, Bruce.
So I issued a commitment letter actually this morning to a borrower who bought a $2.1 million EBITDA, the seller took 75% finance.
Whoa. Wow.
And he said, and I spoke with the seller and asked him, well, why? And he said, give this guy 15 years at 11%. It's an annuity for me. Anything better than this? He said, and for the amount of cash that he's putting down, if I have to buy back the note, because he's running the business not well, I'll do it, no problem.
Yeah.
For 15 years. And did the buyer pay a little bit more in price? Absolutely. To Chris's point, didn't matter.
Yeah.
But hold financing. So
Yeah.
I agree.
So seller financing is an insanely strong predictor of a purchase price. All right, who finds that surprising? That it's literally almost 3 times more important than EBITDA margin.
Well, so in theory, the business is worth what it's worth, and it shouldn't matter how it's financed. But obviously, there's other factors, like if it's growing or something like that.
The crazy part, though, is that 37% for seller financing, 13% for EBITDA margin, and it's greater than if a broker was used. It's greater than region, greater than franchise, greater than SBA industry, and greater than both sales growth and EBITDA growth in the previous 3 years. The amount, the impact from a valuation standpoint, and these again are successful businesses, right? We're not talking about the business that's doing $60,000 of EBITDA, right? We're talking about successful businesses. That the amount that the seller is willing to, and some of these deals have seller financing and they have rolled equity, but it's the amount that seller financing outside of size of company is the biggest predictor. Anyone find that surprising at all?
Sorry, but aren't the two, they aren't mutually exclusive though, right? Because there's times when your EBITDA margin is not what it seems, and no bank will fund it without seller finance. So, so how do you differentiate? Because there is a correlation between the two. They're not necessarily, there's not correlation, there's overlap.
Yeah.
It's not mutually exclusive.
I know, it's fantastic, and you would make a great PhD student or a great professor because you're asking a lot of good questions.
Right.
But yeah, there absolutely is correlation between the two of them,
Yeah.
but it's required, right? It's worse than, it's required. I mean, I used to pump grease for a living, and this stuff is much dirtier and harder. They make you show that essentially the fact they are correlated.
Yeah.
You do a bunch of statistical tests to show that you can credibly say that this is actually what's driving it, and all that back end stuff is done. Which is why this stuff is so interesting, because we can obviously, read biased reports and, hear people say things that aren't necessarily true. But luckily in this case, there's very smart people, very smart academics that go through and scrutinize all this stuff, right, to make sure that it passes that muster test. But if you want to talk afterwards about all the various tests we go through to kind of show that, we could definitely do that at happy hour. I don't drink, but I'll need some alcohol to go through it.
Does this kind of go to the phrase like your price, my terms, right? Like if you have a specific price in mind, seller, that price can't be justified maybe with 100% with the standard SBA note and down payment without the bridge of that seller financing, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It's saying that we were talking about unreasonable prices, right? That sellers always have a number in their head that you can't possibly rationalize. Seller financing is absolutely a way that helps bridge that. And I think that we all intuitively know it, but the fact that it is such a potent driver, I personally find to be surprising. Because if I'm thinking about what's actually going to give me the value of business, right? I'm thinking I care more about the other stuff on there. I care about growth. I care about EBITDA margin, right? But ultimately, when it actually comes to determining the purchase price, how much the seller is willing to invest in it and how much they're willing to take as carry turns out to be the biggest predictor. But at some levels, I don't find. But at some levels, it makes sense too because it's about the signaling effects, right? If they're going to take that much carry to it. It means that they have. I think it means they have faith in the business. Yeah, Sean.
Is there any sort of like graduating effects between the enterprise value of the transaction? Like, it would explain like the variance more, you know, in the lower side deal and less in the larger side deal.
There is, absolutely. This actually has the strongest effect for businesses that are in the range of about 500,000 of EBITDA to $1 million.
Okay.
It has less of an effect as it gets bigger,
Right.
but it is still significant. So if you look at this number for those smaller deals, it's actually going to be higher, right?
Okay.
Yeah. Cool. Excellent. Excellent questions. A good, engaged, energized group here. Okay, I would love, we're going to go on to those are the 5 insights I wanted to share, but we're going to go on to the bonus number 6, all right? We are here at SMBash, and, you know, we tend to talk a lot negatively about private equity from time to time here. Is that, you know, fair to say? We make fun of the best, even though some people are wearing them here. And again, at my DNA, I'm a small business owner at my core. I love small business. So I really wanted to show with this research, actually, first and foremost, that sellers are happier if they sell to like ETA practitioners or keep it in the family. But unfortunately, we cannot say that. Buyer type does not really matter. It doesn't statistically matter. We can't say that either from a success standpoint or from a seller satisfaction standpoint that keeping it in the family, selling to private equity, selling to a strategic, first-time buyer, industry buyer, non-industry buyer, there's no statistical differences across that. So I'm sad to have to report that to you because I really wanted to say you should sell to a ETA practitioner, but the data in this case does not support that.
You don't think that they don't get any sort of, bragging value out of saying they sold a business to a private equity firm?
Yeah. Do I think what I think first what the data shows, does the data show they get value out of?
Meaning there's bragging. They go to the country club and they're like, oh yeah, I sold to this private equity firm out in New York for astronomical amount versus saying, yeah, I sold it to a guy who is operating a business for the first time, who's straight out of his MBA program.
Yeah,
right?
actually,
like it's gonna have two different connotations to the people that they're telling it to.
What I would actually tell you what the data does show is that the bigger effect goes back to point number 1, blinded by the price, right? They actually have regret if they sell to, because we all know that typically private equity peers are be able to pay more money. There's actually more regret around, I wish I hadn't done that because it ended up having we talk about culture a lot, but it had a non-monetary negative effect to them, right? So didn't see a lot of the bragging rights to it, but we did see that the culture got destroyed. That makes me unhappy, right? And a correlation to that is that I just over being offered a high number blinded me to be able to see how that was going to play out. I think we got Bruce back there again.
Yeah, so just to comment on that, I think it, again, goes back to the seller. Does he want his legacy? We bought a business with a couple of partners a couple of years ago. We've got a 30,000 square foot facility. Right in the front of the facility is this guy's name. That was the most important thing. They're not taking my name off the building, right? It's going to stay there. No matter what, your name's going to be on that building. Everybody knows this is the business name. We're never going to change that. That was his biggest factor. He would not sell to a private equity group because they couldn't agree that they wouldn't change it.
Yeah.
So it depends a lot. The reason the seller is selling will literally depend upon whether the deal gets to the closing table. I've seen so many transactions where they don't, and a lot of it comes back to the reasons the seller is selling.
And to build upon that, what the good intermediaries do is the good intermediaries actually listen to what the sellers want, and then they push them in that direction. They don't bring them buyers that don't align to that. But what the bad intermediaries do is they kind of like, all right, Bruce, I hear what you're saying, that you care about this name on the thing, but they don't really listen, and they push them to buyer avatars that don't really make sense. And then when the deals get closer to the finish line, those deals fall apart, and then the broker tries again, then eventually 3 years later the business hasn't sold yet, so they finally get rid of them, bring on a new one that aligns, and going from there. So you see how all these things kind of interplay together to lead to what a successful sale could look like, because different sellers, as we all know, have different utility points, but it is useful to look at what some of the general learnings are that can be applied all across the board. Yeah?
How do you reconcile the earlier points, like post-sale involvement, blinded by the price, like those things affecting the quality of satisfaction of the deal with the quality of like buyer types, seeing that most of these buyer types have some of those transaction characteristics.
That's a great question. I have no idea. I need to spend the next year trying to figure that thing out. There's limited insights that come out of this, right? But if you answer one question, there becomes a whole lot more out of it. So, yeah, there's just not a great answer to that. Yeah. Cool. Other thoughts? Yeah.
Did you, in looking at this, did you quantify or create a subset of sellers that sold because they had to, or because of unforeseen circumstances, death, divorce, disease, whatever? Did that impact the post-sale happiness? I'm guessing it
did.
would, or was that measurable?
Yeah, no, it's not up there, but what we'll call taking intentional action was a very key part of it. So those that waited till there was a health issue of a partner, death in the family, just got too old, key employee quit, right? That is certainly a driver. But that one is kind of something that's as predicted. There wasn't really any kind of surprises in that, so I didn't take the time to put it up there. Yeah, but if you want to get really bored one time, you can like read like the 70-page write-up on this. Deep, dense academic writing. It's worse than purchase agreements and like legal stuff, I promise you. It'll put you to sleep, but you can go through and see some of that stuff there. But some of the more generic things that you think would be true, you'll kind of find on that part of it. Good question. Anyone else? Yeah.
Your data set, the 630, those are all voluntary sales, right? It's not involuntary sales.
In the sense of
liquidation, reorganization.
Yeah.
They wanted to sell it because they can. It wasn't like a fire sale.
Correct. Not a fire sale. The only exception being that sometimes it was because of health issues that they were doing it. So there's like a lever to go, but it was never forced upon them. Yeah. These are all things that are from like very successful business owners. All right, perfect. Current research looking at buyer satisfaction. You're doing some fun work on signaling theory as well. How do you send signals that buyers and sellers pick up on? And a couple key takeaways. One, for sellers, avoid being blinded by the price. Stay close to fair market value if you want to have a satisfied sale. Second is get comfortable with seller financing if you want to increase price. Third is, when it comes to a broker, be ruthless both during the search, take your time, and also be ruthless in getting bad ones out of deals. Any questions? Email me. We can talk about it now. You can also find me on LinkedIn. And hey, listen, I think that small business owners and operators make the best Americans, so kudos to all of you for going down that route. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for your time.